Hey folks, Carolyn here to tell you just a little bit about the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. It's a free, text message-based, confidential emotional support hotline that was created specifically for the gaming community. So whether you're a player, a developer, a streamer, a competitor, any part of the gaming community, the hotline is here for you, ready to provide emotional support or help finding the referrals and resources that you may need. Visit gameshotline.org for more information.
I wonder if I were less aware of what happened to Fred Hampton and how he was assassinated, murdered by the forces of the state, if I would have received the film differently. But I found this hard to watch.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love and give the media you hate a pass. Just it can do whatever it wants, but be critical of the media you love.
Perfect.
I'm Carolyn Pettit, and I'm joined by two women who don't exactly love J. Edgar Hoover. Anita Sarkeesian.
Hello.
And Ebony Adams.
I was a big fan of Martin Sheen's prosthetics, though.
Dude!
They were some wild prosthetics.
I really hope we get into it.
One review I read just said he looked like a melted candle, which I thought was pretty,
I could
accurate.
spend conservatively 45 minutes on those prosthetics alone. And he was barely in the movie, but anyway.
So in case you haven't already guessed, this week we are continuing our month of episodes focusing on Black cinema with a look at the new film Judas and the Black Messiah. Stay tuned. Hey folks, how we doing this week?
Hello.
Hey.
Okay.
I
mean, no, I'm not okay, but like personally, I'm fine, but I am continuing to just be like to spin out with various news stories.
Uh-huh.
I happened to see one this morning that someone linked to on Twitter about this elderly man who is a pancreatic cancer sufferer and was accused of shoplifting from Walmart, and has just been waiting in a jail cell because he can't pay the $500 bail.
Yeah. Hasn't
been able to reach his wife, and this country is so fucked up on every level, and it just like the poor just get ground down into nothing deliberately. Like the system is working precisely the way it's designed to, but man, I'm sitting here getting mad reading the news, Meanwhile, I'm comfortable, like I have a home that I'm living in, I'm able to put food on my table. Like this dude talks about, he's like, we got a nice mobile home, but our fixed income doesn't really cover things, so I have to panhandle for extra money. And I'm just like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah.
What the fuck are we doing?
Obviously the whole cash bail system it only punishes the poor, right? And obviously that disproportionately affects, Black people and other people of color. And I'm so tired of, and I think we collectively have woken up, at least a lot of us, to how empty it always was. But I'm so tired of, news stories that do the thing where it's like, so this is like an example of one I saw in the past week. It was something like, young woman gives all of her life savings to, help her mom pay for, such and such. I don't even remember what, but it's like, this is not like a heartwarming story.
No.
It's not like some heartwarming human interest story, right? She should never have to do that. So stop presenting this shit like, coworkers of man who walks 60 miles to and from his like janitorial job, every day, pitch in to buy him a car. Like, good Lord, like, nice gesture on their part, I guess, but also like he should be paid. Like, there are so many things fundamentally wrong with a society in which that would even be like an issue.
My favorite one is when people say like, the story is, coworkers band together and donate sick time to like pregnant woman or someone who's sick. And I'm like, the fact that we have the gall to publish these stories as if our hearts should be warmed by these is just ample evidence of how fucked up our priorities are. People donating sick time. What?
It's fucked up. I remember listening to an NPR story years ago that was like
back when you still listened to NPR.
I
and
never
it did make you furious.
This was actually what put the nail in the coffin for how much I fucking hate NPR. But it was a story about like these kids who collected coins and like how they went out every day and like made a job of it, of just like collecting coins on the street and like raised enough money to buy a tricycle or whatever. I don't know. They weren't children. They were older. But it was just like, it is a lighter version of what you're all talking about, right? That we were like, look at the tenacity and the strength and the like, you know, coming together and all this shit, when really it's like, no, the system has failed us. And like the people who have nothing are the ones who are helping the other people who have nothing. Like,
yeah.
Yes.
That joke on Twitter about how mutual aid these days is just the same $20 being passed around between, you know, different people. And it's like, that's real. That's real. And I'm glad we're talking about this as a preface to talking about Judas and the Black Messiah, because for all, you know, the problems that people have, you know, justifiably pointed out, or critiques that people have had with the film, there is this one really powerful scene where Fred Hampton is talking about, like, an older woman, you know, like having her house on fire and shit, robbed. And he's like, you know, you don't reform a system, you know, that has put her in that position. You got to abolish that system.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
there's no reform of this.
Yeah, well, with that, you know, maybe we just segue right into the film. The name Fred Hampton is known by too few Americans, or at least by too few white Americans. As deputy chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, he did truly amazing work unifying Chicago's Black and Puerto Rican street gangs, as well as organizations comprised of poor white people, into the original Rainbow Coalition, a revolutionary socialist alliance which mobilized to fight poverty, hunger, police brutality, lack of medical care, and substandard housing in the struggle for racial and economic justice in Chicago. He did all this in his late teens and early 20s, in the years immediately following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, the FBI and the entire white supremacist and capitalist imperialist establishment regarded him as a threat in much the way that it had regarded MLK and Malcolm X as a threat in the preceding years. The new film, Judas and the Black Messiah, tells the story of both Hampton and of Bill O'Neill, the FBI informant who infiltrated the Black Panthers and provided the FBI with inside information that was ultimately used by police to assassinate Fred Hampton on December 4th, 1969, at the age of just 21. The film, starring Daniel Kaluuya as Fred Hampton and Lakeith Stanfield as William O'Neill, has earned both critical acclaim and scrutiny. There's always a danger when Hollywood tells the story of political radicals, that the beliefs and ideals that motivated them will be compromised to make them palatable or less threatening to a wider audience. Is Judas and the Black Messiah up to the task of doing justice to Fred Hampton?
No. The answer is no.
And also, is there any piece of media that could?
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
This is such a fascinating, I'm excited about the existence of this movie and the conversations around it to some degree, because this movie wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. And the conversations that are the very blunt conversations that are about anti-capitalism and white supremacy and poverty and race that are portrayed in this wouldn't have happened before. But I think that one of the things that we are going to get into is but where the film lacks in big ways. And I think that just sort of setting a little bit here is I've been thinking about the fact that it is timely because these are conversations that we are starting to have as a nation. But at the same time, it's a lot easier to have them historically than it is in the current moment. And so I think it's easier to be like, oh, this was back then when things were happening back then, and not apply it as easily to the work that we need to be doing now and the critiques we need to be having now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this film can be a useful and vital corrective to the perception of the Black Panther Party that has existed for many white folks. excuse me, I will not say that this film offers, an entirely historically accurate or fulsome picture of the Black Panther Party, but I think as a way of dismissing the boogeyman, the specter of the Black Panther Party, that that was promulgated, in American history classes and taught to our children, most white children. I think the film can be useful. But what's interesting about this film is the various ways that people are viewing it based upon how much they know about Fred Hampton already and the Black Panther Party, and how much they know about like socialist movements, etc. And I will confess, I'm gonna be straight up with y'all. My knowledge of the Black Panther Party, the history of the Black Panther Party, is woefully small. So there was a lot of stuff, I won't say that I learned in this film, that reminded me, oh yeah, I have a really base level understanding of what happened during this 6-month period, or, with these particular people. And as I was watching the film, I was also like Googling to remind myself like, oh yeah, okay, I remember this person and this is what actually happened. But I have comparatively few critiques of the way the film presents the party compared to my critiques of the way the film presents Hampton and the period, and the film like as a film. So I want to lay that out there, because I know that there are people who listen to us who are so smart and so well read, and I feel the pressure as like the Black co-host on this episode to be like, oh, okay, here's X, Y, and Z. I don't have that knowledge. I can just tell you how I received this film, and what I took from it. And I'll tell you one thing off top. I found this very, very hard to watch. Not because it was a bad film, but because I knew what was going to happen. I knew what it was leading to. And the film does, I wonder if I were less aware of what happened to Fred Hampton and how he was assassinated, murdered by the forces of the state, if I would have received the film differently. But I found this hard to watch because, man, Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, like every performance in this piece is wonderful, right? And so knowing what's coming, knowing that the forces of the U.S. government and law enforcement are determined to take this man out and eradicate his influence. Woo, it was hard. It was a tough 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just say something really quick on
Please.
what Ebony's
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
I think, Ebony, you're super spot on around like probably one of the most humanizing portrayals of the Black Panthers ever in mainstream media. And I think that's really incredibly valuable, because the one, you don't really learn about the Black Panthers in school, at least not like mainstream schooling. Mm-hmm. And if you have heard of them or are familiar with them, it's laced with the ways that the FBI and the sort of mainstream folks were framing them as these like violent, horrible radicals. Like what they were doing in the film, well, they were saying that they're just like this other side of the coin when it came to the Klan.
Like, yeah.
And that's how a lot of people think of the Black Panthers, as these like, I mean, they were radical, but they were radical because they were feeding their children, like the community. Like the thing about the Black Panthers that gets erased so much is how much they took care of their community. They're like, and like the other piece of that is that a lot of folks have never heard of the Young Lords, which I think is really tragic as well, which is the Puerto Rican sort of similar kind of community group that's like super radical and political. And they were, also trying to provide medical care to their communities. They were taking out the trash, like, because these communities weren't being taken care of by the city. And I think I really appreciated at least seeing that component in this of humanizing who these people were. And I think that we're in a time and a place where we can hear people talk about like being anti-capitalist and being revolutionary in a way that we couldn't have before. So I appreciate that, at least. Like, it's not dismissive of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, there's a bit of a tendency to, to admittedly to grade a film like this a bit on like an ideological curve, in the sense of like, so last year in 2020, there was a film that came out called The Trial of the Chicago 7, which, which Fred Hampton is a character in that film. but and that it's also a Chicago story. It's a historical drama. But that film is written and directed by Aaron Sorkin, right? Like the guy behind The West Wing. And, and so it's a film about political radicals that is itself like, you do not trust Aaron Sorkin to tell a story about political radicals in a way that is like truly radical, right? So he does shit where like, one of the prosecutors in the trial is like this like sympathetic, character. And it's like, and some people look at that and like, ooh, that's nuance. And it's like, no, it's not fucking nuance. It's compromise. It's like centering what, a story that should not be centered. It should not be like, should not be making these compromises with the status quo. So, watching this film, Judas and the Black Messiah, like it was really, like refreshing and exhilarating and invigorating. There is no sort of, I don't think, compromising or effort to like to elude or evade like the radical, political ideas that motivated Fred Hampton, and he gives voice to those ideas. I mean, insofar as like a 2-hour film can do that and still tell, the narrative story that it's trying to tell. I mean, I felt this film was trying very much to honor those. And I mean, he constantly, is saying things that I think are both like, things that we can say perhaps a little more openly now than we could in the past, but also still very much are very pertinent to our current political reality.
I think
I think there's a version of this film done by filmmakers like Aaron Sorkin that cannot resist including either a prospective character who is the white savior or a very important white ally, and it was refreshing not to get this in this film. Even though the character played by Jesse Plemons, FBI agent Roy Mitchell, there's mention of the fact that he was part of the investigating team that, investigated the murders of 3 civil rights workers, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, that a lot of people know from the film Mississippi Burning, which is also trash. But a film that posits that like the forces that are complicit, like the white supremacist forces that are complicit, are also somehow like investigating themselves. And I love how this film doesn't let him off the hook. There is no point at which we believe, as sincere as he is, like I liked how, there are moments where he seems to be uncomfortable with what the FBI is doing. But then when Hoover says, like, what are you going to do when your daughter brings a Negro home? It's all laid bare, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could agree with you, but I don't. I actually really had problems with the Jesse Plemons character in this film. I mean, and like, it's almost a shame to even be talking about him. I mean, we have to talk about like Daniel Kaluuya and like Fred Hampton. But like, if I had a real problem with this film, it was with the handling of, I mean, Jesse Plemons is always great and reliable as like horrible white men, right? And so, like, I mean, especially, of course, I always primarily think of that Black Mirror episode, but I mean, he's just very reliable. Yeah.
Except in
Friday Night Lights.
Friday Night Lights, thank you. Just saying, he's not trash in that.
But and I want him to be able to play, of course, a wide variety of characters who are also not trash.
He's just so good at being shitty white dudes.
Yeah. But I mean, I really did feel like his character in this film, like that scene where, he learns that like his fellow FBI agent, his fellow FBI agent sort of reveals to him this very, very unethical, and fucked up thing that they ran with the Panthers involving an informant and a person within the Panthers who was murdered. And I feel like these moments are designed, yes, to make us feel a little sympathy for the Roy Mitchell character, who almost seems like he has these moments where his eyes are open to how awful what the FBI is doing is, but he also still believes that yes, the the Panthers are the opposite side of the coin of the Klan, which is so ridiculous for
I-
a million reasons. And so I don't know. I just felt like this character's only function in the story, in my view, should be to illuminate for us how the very oppressions and limitations and things that the Black Panthers are mobilizing to fight against are the very same things that allow that give a person like Bill O'Neill, played by Lakeith Stanfield, so few options and opportunities that we understand, like how the FBI then keeps using those oppressions and exploitations to its own benefit and continues to exploit and manipulate people. And I did feel like this film did needlessly kind of humanized the Roy Mitchell character a bit.
I think I disagree with you to some degree, because I think that what I think was really smart in how they did it was that they did show him be like, I don't know about all this, but he still goes along with it, and that's how fascism perpetuates, right? That shows us how the system exists, because even if you have some doubts, you can't do anything about it. You don't leave it, and you follow the path of least resistance here. And I think that is actually really powerful.
That's fair. That's a fair, argument. Yeah.
My biggest problem with this film is I feel like it should have been a Fred Hampton biopic and not a movie about Bill O'Neill. And it was a movie in large part about the taking down of Fred Hampton instead of the wholeness of this incredible human that did all of these things.
Yeah. I have to say though, my God, I think Daniel Kaluuya is so magnificent in this film. I really do. And like, I understand critiques about, around casting and like his age, like he is older. And there's definitely an argument to be made that if they had cast an actor who was actually the age of Fred Hampton, like that could have been extraordinarily powerful and effective in its own right.
I don't want to steamroll. I want to just take it. I'll let you finish, but
sure. Thanks.
But thanks, Kanye.
Yeah.
But I want to just pause really quickly because I agree that Daniel Kaluuya did an incredible job, but Fred Hampton was 21 when he was murdered. So everything that he did before that, he was a fucking teenager. And Bill O'Neill started doing this when he was 17, and I think that I didn't actually put that together until I read the article by Angelica Bastien about her review about this movie that I think is really powerful. That it would have fundamentally changed the way that we think about these characters. They're not characters; these humans, these people that existed in the world. So I just didn't want to. I didn't want to just sidestep that too much.
That's absolutely essential. But given that this is the film that we have, this is the film that exists. Daniel Kaluuya, is like an actor of just remarkable, charisma, and what really was incredible about his performance in this film for me was that not only did he make the sort of the big loud speeches, right, where he's like being persuasive to large groups of people, many of whom are predisposed to not want to be receptive to what he has to say. Not only is he sort of magnetic and incredibly compelling in those scenes, but, we get scenes, and I wish we had gotten more of these kinds of scenes, but in the scenes where the more quiet, intimate scenes of just interacting kind of one-on-one with another human being, he has such amazing technique as an actor, and he does things, I think, with just like his eyes and his gaze that speak so much. I'm thinking particularly of a scene where he goes to visit the mother of a character named Jimmy Palmer, right? Who
I think it was Winters. Winters' mother
Sorry.
Thanks. Anyway, that's good material. Go.
He goes to visit the mother of a young man who had been killed. And just the way that he sits there with her and honors her memory of her son and tells her that that they will name the medical clinic after him so that his legacy, in the, I guess the collective mind isn't sort of the violence that ended his life, but is what he sort of fought for, and for prior to
Healing.
that.
They said healing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. It's remarkable. I mean, he moved me to tears repeatedly throughout this film.
Whew, boy, you are right. Like Daniel Kaluuya is. People talk about an actor who can, command the viewer's gaze, and he absolutely, makes this seem effortless, which is vital when you're portraying a character like Fred Hampton, who, yes, had that kind of charisma and that kind of presence at, as Anita pointed out, like such a young age. So I think it was you, Carol, who posted Angelica Bastien, friend of the pod, posted her review. And even though I enjoyed the movie at some level, there are some things in her review, which we'll post in the show notes, that I really, really like. I was like, yes, she articulated this perfectly.
Right?
And
Sorry,
one of the-
that review, I was like, yeah. I mean, I didn't agree with
Listen,
everything, but there was a lot there that I was like,
and
fuck
also
yeah.
like Angelica can write her ass
I
off.
know.
So
She's amazing.
whew. But one of the things that I really loved is how she talked about the film gave no space to offering a vision of Black life outside of this particular moment, which it should have done to emphasize what it is, like the community that came together, to support Fred and the Black Panthers, and the joy and life that exists in Black communities and other communities of color outside of this, that is highlighted by the dreary, like, grays and blues of the cinematography of this film. I had a real problem with the way that that Daniel Kaluuya was lit in this film. Y'all know I bring this up constantly, the way that Black people are lit in films. Daniel Kaluuya is a dark-skinned Black man, but there are scenes here. It reminded me of that damn Perry Mason show where, what's his name, Paul? There are scenes where you literally are like, what is going on here? Why do you only have lights for the white people in this show but have none for the Black folks? But I think there was a deliberate choice made by the director and the DP in this film to shoot it in this very like crime thriller kind of way. And this is something that Angelica points out, like the climax of the film where Fred is assassinated plays out almost like, mob hits in movies. And I was really dissatisfied by that. I was also, as much as I enjoyed the film, the Black Panther Party that you see in this film is in Chicago. The Black Panther Party in Chicago it was fundamentally different from the way the party, organized itself in Oakland or New York. I wanted to see more of what made Chicago, Chicago. The times when the film does offer you like a really vibrant sense of place and time is when the film works best for me. So there's that great scene where Lakeith Stanfield as Bill O'Neill is walking down the street with this hat, with this like sharp polka dotted hat band. And the way he's framed in that shot, and then jumps in this like, Buick 225 and is playing the music behind him. And I was like, yes, that's precisely when the film got it. When you were just, like immersed immediately in Chicago, 1968, and what it meant to be a Black man feeling like you own the streets in that moment. And you can then extrapolate from that why he would have continued, not just to save his own skin, to allow himself to be infiltrated into the Panthers, but also, the rush of power he might have felt, or the money that he gave him, the material benefits. Like I felt like that was lacking.
It also didn't feel like you're saying, I kind of indirectly, but like it didn't feel like Chicago. Like
not at all.
Like there's nothing about this that was uniquely or interestingly rooted in Chicago, and like why?
Because Chicago politics is everything. Like Fred Hampton came out of Chicago. Like that, it matters to his story, I guess is my point.
Like other than mentioning like South Side and like West Side, like but
yeah.
like
I mean, there's some cracks about like Mayor Daley or what Daley and things like that. Like, but as the texture of Chicago as like a place is kind of lacking.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line that says it's not a question of violence or nonviolence. It's a question of resistance to fascism or non-existence in fascism.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hell yes. Like I was thinking how, we are not, and people are smart. And I think I opened this kind of being dismissive of where I thought folks were at in their understanding of this. Like understanding the relevance to today. And that, what they're talking about is like these reforms that we're talking about are not enough. And they're the steps that can get us to revolution, but they're not the end point. And it was really refreshing to be reminded of that. So when we talk about defund the police, right? Like that's one step towards abolishing the police system, right? It's not the answer. It's the step towards the revolutionary space, the liberatory space. And I think that there are folks who like, and we've talked about this, it's sort of like startling to those of us who have been in these spaces or talking about this for a long time that all of a sudden, like the average white liberal's like, yeah, fuck yeah, defund the police. And you're like, whoa, what timeline are we in? Like, what the fuck just happened here? But at the same time, like, how do we help folks take that next step into understanding that it's the whole goddamn system that is the problem? And that's what I think is really special about some of the moments in this film and what the film represents as a reminder that, like, our policing systems are doing the same shit. Like, the FBI is infiltrating activist groups. That is happening today. That is not a thing of the past. Right. And I think that it's really important that we understand that.
I think one of the most, Little Ray Howery is so good and needs to be in everything. But that brief scene he's in where, he tries to, or he gets the drugs to Bill to pass to Fred so that he will sleep through the assassination attempt, his role, the role of the Panther infiltrator that Carol mentioned before, who literally was responsible for the brutal murder of an innocent Black Panther, that he accused to deflect blame from himself and suspicion from himself, right? The way that this film shows these like Black foot soldiers just, so bought into the system that is seeking to eradicate folks just like them. As you say, like, these people are absolutely here. And it's not the, sort of like the bumbling way that the alt-right is blaming like Antifa for, storming the Capitol. Like, that wasn't us, whatever. No, these people are embedded in our shit,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the, in addition to Angelica Bastien's excellent review, there's a review by Jordaine Searles for okplayer.com of this film, and I think to point that we've sort of been making. She says this at one point in her review. Hampton's speeches are compelling and especially resonant in a time when we as a nation are pushing the police to be accountable for their racism. What he wanted for Chicago is what we want for ourselves now. An equal opportunity to live and succeed in the world without fear of intimidation, violence, and death. Judas and the Black Messiah plays as a call to action. If we don't work together and commit to a revolution, it's never going to happen. It's not just about the individual, it's about all of us. There's something exhilarating about watching a film portray history in a way that is still achingly relevant today. And that for me is like, you cannot, or I cannot, and I think many of us cannot listen to Hampton's words as they are, voiced in this film. And even though there is perhaps that element of like, oh, well, because these are events from a few decades ago, although hardly ancient history, it's like safer to have a character, a figure from then say it. But the relevance to, the ongoing, the fact that these are not issues of the past by any stretch, but are very much issues that we are fundamentally kind of grappling with and struggling with today is, it's undeniable. It's inescapable.
The framing of the movie with starting with a recreation of an Eyes on the Prize interview, I was like, wait, that threw me. So I just want to shout out, like, if you've never seen the docuseries Eyes on the Prize, like, you should. It's very classic in terms of talking about civil rights issues, like that, because that's a real thing.
And also, I think Agnes Varda's documentary on the Black Panthers is available on Amazon, which blows my mind, like the mental break required for that to be up there. But that's how things are in this, year 2021. One thing I want to make sure we mention before we run out of time is the women in this film. Mm-hmm. Dominique Fishback is amazing. And I wish there had been more scenes. I mean, it obviously would have, maybe that wasn't the story they were trying to tell, but those like quiet scenes between Fred and the woman who now is called Aku and Jerry, like, they were just so lovely, and I was so glad for them. Just like, of all the things that young man had to withstand and all the weight he had to carry, I was so glad for the people who were truly, honestly, and sincerely in his corner and loved him. And this young woman who, was right there with him, was next to him in the bed when he was assassinated. I just thought her performance was amazing. And I also really loved the character of Judy, although I believe she's a composite of various female Panthers from history. But I just loved her. I mean, I know we make fun of the term badass, but let me tell you something. When she popped up in that window with that gun, and was just like, we're going to clap back at these police. I was just like, I've never in my life had the kind of a tenth of the bravery it would take to do something like that, but she just brought it. Like I said, the performances in this film is one area where I didn't personally, I didn't feel let down at all. I thought everybody was just operating, top notch.
I thought so too. I think that, like, it was important to show that women were absolutely a part of the movement. I think they sugarcoated a little bit, like they pretend like sexism it didn't exist in this space.
Yeah.
But like, I'm kind of okay with that in the grand scheme of the story that they're trying to tell. But it wasn't that hunky dory for women. Like, let's just be clear on that. But women, like, and like in a lot of social movements, women tend to get integrated into the movements, and then when and if those groups win, women get thrown to the sideline as soon as they get put into power. So that's a whole another story about social movements around the world. But yeah.
Basically, what I'm saying is more media about the Panthers. Like, this should not be the end all be all. No. But yeah, I thought like I said. Oh, go ahead.
So I do want to just bring up, like, the Rainbow Coalition. We didn't talk about that, and I think that what the film beautifully shows is Fred Hampton's savvy about the importance of cross oppression solidarity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that, I think, is something that like still activists really struggle with today, to be able to cross those lines and be like, yeah, we have a lot of things not in common, but we can fight for these things together.
Right.
And that makes us stronger. And his ability, to go into these spaces and be such a rhetorician, right? Such an orator, and convince people of actually like coming together. And so it really, I mean, it moved me a lot in those moments where you had the headquarters were bombed out and everyone just was like, how do we help? Or like, here's money from our group that like kind of hated you at first, but we realized that like we need to do this together. And I think that's an important reminder for us that like we need to come together with folks. And I'm not talking about come together with like Nazis and the Klan and shit by any stretch of the imagination. I'm talking about like, there's a lot of overlaps in environmental justice and women's rights and poverty. And, like there's a lot of ways that folks can be coming together that can make us more powerful. And that, it's kind of a cliche now, but anywhere there's people, there's power. Like, you can't like one small group of people can't do this alone. Right.
Right.
And so I I appreciated the reminders of what it means to be an activist and what kinds of things we're actually fighting for through this.
Mm-hmm.
No individual creates a rebellion. It's created out of the conditions.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure it wasn't as simple, as him going into a room where a bunch of poor white people who have a Confederate flag on the wall, and him just saying a few words and winning them over. But I sure did appreciate that the film made those, didn't shy away from the fact that he did build those bridges and
Right.
And I'm sure it was messy as fuck and was always tenuous, like without a doubt, right? But but them all understanding that they are like all impoverished and what the systemic causes of that and the over policing and all that shit, like yeah,
absolutely.
Well, 21, man, they murdered him when he was 21. All those kids, all of them, they're just babies, and the police just like murdered all of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
What a way
to
end
I know.
Conversation. Sorry. It's just
the film is on. Yeah. I was just gonna say the film's on HBO until I think the 13th of March. So I would definitely encourage folks to check it out before it leaves.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, folks. We will be right back to share some Freq Outs. Hey friends, thanks for listening to FFR. If you enjoy our weekly conversations about the intersection of feminism and pop culture, consider hopping over to patreon.com/femfreak and joining our podcast community. You can get access to exclusive bonus episodes, join our friendly Discord server, participate in polls to help decide topics for future episodes, and more. Plus, you'll be helping us keep bringing FFR to the virtual podcast airwaves. Visit patreon.com/femfreak today. What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Anita, what have you got for us?
Is that your imitation of me?
No, that's my imitation of Jiminy Glick. Jiminy Glick, yes. The Martin Short portrayed entertainment reporter.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's delightful.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I have been wanting to freak out about Ted Lasso for weeks and weeks and weeks, and there's always something more important or timely to talk about. Mm-hmm. So Ted Lasso is a show that came out on Apple TV in August of 2020, and I was a little slow on getting on the bandwagon because it's it's a show about a soccer team in London and how they hire an American football coach who knows nothing about soccer to coach this like professional team. And it's Jason Sudeikis, who I've never thought anything of. Like I don't even know what other stuff he's been in. He's just not someone on my radar. And I didn't really think anything of it. And now, since I watched it once, I've now watched it 3 times all the way through. Aww. Like, this show, I think, might be one of the all-time best contemporary sitcoms ever made. Like, it is so sweet and tender and pure, and it just makes me grin with, like, such joy. It's just such a remarkable feat. And I knew it from the very first, like, the pilot episode brings all of this stuff together in a way that I'm like, these are remarkable writers. So there's a scene in the pilot where the 2 coaches are on an airplane and they are flying to London for the first time and they're just chatting. And then it's like, it's time to go to bed, sleep on the plane, so we're not jet lagged when we land. And the coach, Ted, says to his friend, hey, so when we're sleeping and we run into each other in our dreams, let's have a little fun with it and pretend we don't know each other. And I was like, oh my God, this tells you everything you need to know about this character. Like, It was just such a perfect moment that explains who this guy is. And I will say too that like, it's not just that this is like this super optimistic dude that's just like really warm and friendly and like, like kills everyone with kindness, which should be really annoying, but it's not. it's also a show that is deeply about like caring for one another and so many different kinds of masculinity and challenging the toxicity of that. It all wrapped up in this like short little sitcom where I just, it kind of blew me away. So yeah, I highly recommend watching it, especially if you're looking for something that will make you just kind of feel good, but also give you some feelings about things, you know?
Aw.
That sounds great.
And you said it's on Apple TV?
Yeah, it's on Apple TV.
How many episodes are there? Do you know?
10.
Or 10 episodes.
Yeah. They're like 20, 30-minute episodes, so you get through it pretty quickly. And I think also one other thing about it is that there is a female character who's like very sexual. And I think it's a great example of how you can talk about sex and desire sex and like be that person without it being sexist. And I don't think, I mean, I think there are examples of that in the world, but this in particular, I was just like, I really loved the way that they did it. And like, she just is so deeply who she is. And it's really delightful. Oh, and also, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna ask who the writer or showrunner is. Do you know?
I don't, but I can look it up real quick.
Well, I can't. No, I just didn't know if you knew off the top of your head. I've heard a lot of people talk about this show. I don't have Apple TV, but maybe it's time for me to go in for the old free trial.
You can be a part of my Apple family if you want. I'm trying to get Carolyn to watch it, and I was like, here, I'm just gonna give you all like my account so you can watch this fucking thing because I feel so strongly about it. Yeah. So please watch it. Tell me what you think. I want to talk about it all the time. So hit me up on Twitter, but not this weekend because I had a horrible Twitter weekend and I'm taking a break from it.
As you should.
As I should. Anyways, that's it.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Thank you. And you can submit your own Freak Out at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Join us next week as we talk about the critically acclaimed comedy, The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Not to be confused with The 40-Year-Old Virgin. It might be a little weird for us to talk about. I mean, that film would probably give us a lot to talk about, too, at some point.
It does not hold up.
Okay.
Just letting everybody know right now, do not rewatch The 40-Year-Old Virgin if there's any part of you that thought you should.
Okay. But, again, the film we are talking about is called The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and it is written, directed by, and starring Rada Blank. It's on Netflix. You can watch it so you are on the same page with us when we do our episode next week. Our show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. Our work is by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening. Wanted to, give Phil, amp up Phil a little bit there for whatever reason. Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. Next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.